we expect that the chronological Gospels are going to cause some controversy out there. Are they, Scott?
They are indeed. In fact, you know, when you learn something new like this, that Yeshua's ministry was only 70 weeks, that blows a lot of theories out of the water. So, of course, there's going to be some questions. Some people are going to be angry with what they thought they knew, et cetera, et cetera. One of the most popular questions I'm getting right now has to do with one of the items that makes the 70-week chronology make sense, and that is John 6:4. And some people are saying, how dare you say that it does not belong in the Bible? How can you depend on this one manuscript, et cetera, et cetera? But what do we say to that just off the bat?
Well, being angry, this is a common malady, a common problem for pastors who, you know, went through all the schooling, been in the pulpit for 40 years and still can't count to 3. And then they watch the Jonah Code or they read the chronological Gospels and they get angry because they realize they've been lied to their whole life. And they had promulgated that, and it's understandable. I think we all get upset when we find out that Santa Claus really doesn't exist. It doesn't matter what age we learn that. And when it comes to the chronological Gospels, you know, I'm going to open up to page 3 here because this is very important that you read the introduction. This is the thesis, ladies and gentlemen, and this thesis has not been broken by anyone. Before turning to the first page of the chronological Gospels, there's one problem that must be addressed. Most of the Christian world has grown up with the concept that Yeshua's ministry was 3.5 years in duration. However, no scholar has ever been able to prove this hypothesis, and in fact, the plain text of the gospel narrative proves that a 3.5-year ministry is a mathematical impossibility. The 3.5-year ministry construct is a theological invention of an age-old religious system that offers absolutely no proof for that which it demands its adherents blindly accept. Furthermore, this eschatological creation has tragically destroyed the gospel chronology and heavily veiled the gospel of the kingdom that Yeshua taught. And then the first line of the second paragraph, it was Eusebius who first proposed a 3.5-year ministry more than 300 years after the resurrection of Yeshua. And here is the important thing, ladies and gentlemen, that for more than 300 years, there was not one dissenting opinion that Yeshua's ministry was about 1 year. So when one person comes on the scene, the champion of Constantine, who wrote the oration in exaltation of the Emperor Constantine, who then proclaimed himself to be the Pontifex Maximus, which is the official title of the high priest of paganism, and then pronounces himself as Almighty God upon the earth, the vicar of Christ and his spiritual descendants. Okay, right then we know that we have got a taint that's been added into it and denying more than 300 years of testimony from the apostles, those who learned from the apostles, and now come up with this idea that Jesus' ministry is 3.5 years, which is 1/2 of a week, and that's exactly what he wrote in Demonstratio Evangelistica 8 and page 106. In paragraph 8, this is what he wrote. Ladies and gentlemen, he is the one that invented the 3.5-year ministry, and the reason why you're so attached to it is because you're afraid to think for yourself. Now, John 6:4, we have text, the one that I quote in this particular book. This is in the museum at the home of the Archbishop of Canterbury. H.A. Scribner, one of the most respected Greek scholars of all time, says this singular manuscript, minuscule manuscript that's in the Lambeth Palace Museum is by far the most important manuscript in all that museum. Why? It goes back to a family of manuscripts that go back to before the words of John 6:4 were added to later text. See, we have no originals. We have families of manuscripts that are copies of copies of copies of copies. There is another manuscript that is in Germany, and on my trip over there this spring, because I have a daughter that's going to be having a baby over there in Germany, and so we're going to go over there and secure that manuscript as well as the one there so that we have the actual photographs of this. But the words that are added to John 6:4 in all the later manuscripts, and the feast and Passover, a feast of the Jews was nigh, was not in any of those manuscripts.
Okay, now that brings up an interesting question.
Okay.
So it appears, because this manuscript came around the 13th century, correct? So you're
that's right.
saying that, because some people are arguing that, well, obviously that verse was in there before the 13th century, and this is the first one to...
Certainly.
Okay, so how do we answer that?
So it's a family of manuscripts. In other words, it's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, because you can't go much before see, we don't have any manuscripts of the first 4 centuries. They don't exist. They're dust. Okay? So you have copies of copies of copies. So here is one thing that we see. There's John chapter 2 and 3 is Passover. John chapter 12 is Passover. If the manuscripts in the first 300 years had another Passover in John 6:4 right in the middle, none of these the historians for 300 years would have been so stupid as to not understand it would take well over 2 years to fulfill 3 Passovers. It's simple mathematics. You have the testimony of all of the early church fathers and historians saying his ministry was about 1 year, and the manuscript of John that they were reading could not possibly have had John 6:4 in it. Now we come to the real breaker. Right here on this particular situation, we have in all 4 Gospels, the feeding of the 5,000 takes place at the end of the summer when the 12 apostles return from their paired assignments throughout the villages of the Galilee. Okay? That's when the feeding of the 5,000 takes place. All 4 Gospel authors record that one miracle. It is the only miracle recorded by all 4 Gospel authors. It happens in the middle of Yeshua's ministry. And with all of them recording it, it gives us a singular moment in time that everything can be coordinated at that very moment. Now, the next chapter in John, chapter 7, Yeshua is going up to the Feast of Tabernacles. The same chapter in Matthew, he's going to the Feast of Tabernacles. The next chapter in Mark, he's going to Tabernacles. The next chapter in Luke, he's going to Tabernacles. Because it's at the end of the summer, the next Feast is Tabernacles. And they added, scribes added, and this is universal. This happens. We can take you back and show you the manuscripts. We've got about 5,000 extant manuscripts on the planet in the Greek language. And we can show you where scribes added things in, they left things out, they took things out. They moved entire sections, such as the woman in the trial of adultery in John chapter 8. It's in John chapter 7 in most of the older manuscripts. And so we can show that these things were moved and that they changed them. They didn't change many, but when they did change them, this one, they got caught red-handed. Because when you know the feast, you know Yeshua is not going to stay in the Galilee and feed thousands of people with leavened bread during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. He's not going to go to the Capernaum synagogue 2 days later and preach to a full house when everyone is supposed to be at Jerusalem for the feast. 3 days later, he feeds another 4,000 with leavened barley loaves, and the Pharisees show up from Jerusalem to confront him on why his disciples are not taking the 2-handled negel vesser and washing their hands before they eat bread. He never goes to Jerusalem, but what happens in the same chapter in Matthew, the next chapter in John, he's up to the Feast of Tabernacles. They got caught red-handed, ladies and gentlemen. Now the gospel record fits, and it took me 40 years to get it. If you think you can pull this thing off, if you think you can answer and handle every contradiction in the English text of the Bible, good luck, Einstein. It took me 40 years to do it, and here it is, and it's only what, $75,000 for each copy, and it's a bargain at that. So get it, and no more complaining about whether John 6:4. They added it, and that's why I documented it, and I take it right back out because it never was there to begin with. Read the thesis, the entire thing. I go on for 10 pages explaining it all, and at the end of this, you will know that the Gospels fit together. There are no errors. They were divinely inspired, and each author gives his piece of the puzzle. When you put it together, ladies and gentlemen, you've got the screenplay. Let the movie play, and you are going to be blessed.